backing down. Stephanie?
All right, I want to bring my panel in. Republican strategist Tim Miller, who previously served as communications director for Jeb Bush, Zerlina Maxwell, director of progressive programming for Sirius XM, and Kate Kelly, a New York Times reporter who covers Wall Street. Tim, I want to start with you. We know that President Trump, it was all about the wall on the campaign trail. Then just yesterday, Mick Mulvaney made it clear this wall is going to be part of this budget. And suddenly there's a change. What do you think is going on here? I mean, it does make a lot of sense in terms of, even if you go to the most ardent Trump supporters, their #1 priority has never been the wall. One would say, at the very least, they care about their own health care before they care about this wall.
Well, the answer to your question is, who is Trump talking to? And that's his most ardent supporters, right? He's an unusual president in that he's not really trying to expand beyond his base. And he has a lot of runway, so to speak, on the wall for two reasons. One, border crossings are already down during his presidency. And two, a recent poll showed that 98% of people that voted for Trump are still with him. So he can worry about getting this budget passed without worrying about backlash from his base. There's going to be concern trolling from the left and from the media that try to tease him over this, but as long as his base is with him, he's got some time to deal with it.
Okay, what President Trump is very good at doing is firing up his base, presenting at rallies, those beautiful sound bites. But when it comes to actually getting things put into law and action, Kate, he's already asking for $1 billion down payment, not from Mexico, from the U.S. government, from Congress, to help with this $20 billion project. You think he's going to get it?
Well, I think the addendum to this tweet should have been ellipsis in September or later. I mean, I think I would agree with Tim. He's trying to still appeal to his base, and they are sticky. I mean, we had a good story in the New York Times yesterday. Workers in Huntington, Indiana, from Carrier, who lost their jobs, still fans of Trump, even though they lost their as he preserved jobs in Indianapolis. But I think essentially he's trying to stick with the rhetoric, but it's probably not likely to happen. As you said, his centerpiece, healthcare reforms, didn't work out. He's now trying to jam out some tax reforms very hastily, from all appearances, just to show that he can get some things done. But we're very close to the first 100 days, and we really don't see any major legislative accomplishments. We see a lot of policy talk, not a lot of policy action.
Executive orders really just order reports to be written.
Reviews of existing regulations.
I mean, reviews, that's just more work for his own staff. Zerlina, as he's at least delaying this call to action as far as the wall being put in the budget, do you think Democrats could work with President Trump, with the administration this week, to keep the government open?
Sure.
Maybe you could make an argument that maybe this was smart negotiating skills.
I don't know about that, but I do, but I do think that, you know, Democrats certainly have an interest in keeping the government open and making sure that we're functioning. I think that if there is a shutdown, Republicans will bear a lot of the brunt of that because they, you know, literally are in charge of every single branch of government, and so it's on them to keep the government open and functioning and actually show that they can govern once in charge. I think with President Trump, the issue is that he doesn't really have a deep understanding of policy. And so what you're seeing is he doesn't have the ability to go out and build consensus on his policy initiatives to actually get them accomplished. You can't say, I'm going to propose a bill on Wednesday and then have everybody be able to have time to read it and understand it and go into their districts and get rally support around it. And so he's going to have trouble unless he does those steps first.
All right, Peter Alexander, President Trump has said over and over this 100-day mark is nothing, it's meaningless, yet he seems to want to get a lot of things done this week so he can improve his grade. Now he wants to get this tax reform out there. I mean, as if his team, as if Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn don't have enough to do right now.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. It's worth noting that within the last several days, the president has sort of dismissed this 100-day benchmark as a, quote, ridiculous standard. But even overnight, the White House came out with a new website specifically focused on trying to demonstrate all the, quote, bold action, as it describes it, the president has accomplished in the course of these first 100 days. You talk about some of those potential wins the president's looking to rack up in these 100 days. Tax reform among them, with an announcement expected tomorrow, I'm told by senior White House aides, that it's really going to be sort of a laying out of principles here, including a massive tax cut. Another campaign pledge he's looking to follow through on is the corporate tax rate being reduced, as he will propose it, from 35% to 15%. Remaining to be seen how exactly they pay for all this. We know there's several meetings today, some of them up on the Hill. The Treasury Secretary and the President's advisor, Gary Cohn, will meet with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, among others. Among the discussions to take place at a meeting here at the White House with the President included will be some of the elements of this plan. Among them, the potential elimination of the alternative minimum tax, familiarly known as the AMT, and separately the elimination potentially of the deduction that Americans get for their 401k. Stephanie?
All right, but this ain't Ronald Reagan's economy. Kate, you can cut corporate taxes all you want, but President Trump going from 35% to 15%, believing it's going to spur growth, where exactly do we think, in a concrete example, that's going to happen? And you could point to President Reagan, but we're living in a completely different world.
Well, look, if you look at what Stephen Mnuchin said, this is going to pay for itself. I mean, they're clearly counting on a very ambitious GDP level. They think 3% growth is possible.
Where is that going to come from?
Well,
are you looking at the amount of malls and retail stores closing across the country? Those retail workers are going to be the next displaced factory workers.
Look, I mean, they're obviously being optimistic, maybe too much so, and they also think that this is going to pay for itself over 10 years or so through dynamic scoring. We'll see what happens at the end of that. I mean, the debate, of course, is if they put out this 15% corporate tax rate as a goal, this could end up being more rhetoric that the president can't deliver on, much as we're seeing sort of with the wall and other things. It's also an even more aggressive stance than they had just a month ago. Gary Cohn on the Hill a month ago, maybe not even, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, was telling members of Congress and the Senate that it would be low 20% was the goal.
Now we're back on comfortable, familiar turf, right? The Republicans want to cut taxes, and the Democrats and the media saying that's not going to work.
But he's looking to cut taxes more than GOP members are. And if you look at, well, 35%, if you actually look at what corporates pay, it's more like 22%. There are some that pay nothing. They are the most sophisticated when it comes to how they pay their taxes.
I think this is an opening salvo in a negotiation.
Right.
I think Trump does want to lower the corporate tax rate a lot and get it competitive with other countries around the world. Now, to get it as low as 15%, we probably need to get rid of some of those loopholes and deductions, and that's when things get complicated on the Hill. My bet is we end up with just a tax cut that maybe is more modest than his initial bet. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of companies out there that could use that tax cut, and I do think it will help.
Yeah, there's a lot of European companies that said that, and in Europe, they've got a far lower tax rate, and you know what they've got? A zombie economy.
Europe has a lot of other problems.
Speaking of how they pay for this, they're going to have a further problem if the border adjustment tax goes away, because that's been extremely unpopular with big retailers. You mentioned retailers. And, you know, there's increasing chatter that it's going to be sidelined or maybe even shelved.
Zerlina, I got to ask you about President Obama.
Yes.
President Obama spoke yesterday, but something that stood out to me, I guarantee, I haven't spoken to Kate about it, this was a what to her as well. President Obama has agreed for his first Wall Street speech. President Obama, who is highly critical of Hillary Clinton and her speeches, is getting paid $400 grand. And not to speak at J.P. Morgan, not to speak at Morgan Stanley, to speak at Cantor Fitzgerald. Okay, so as far as, you know, high level, you know, considered the most respected firms, it is certainly not Cantor Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I mean, I can't sit here and defend that and say that, you know, we should be giving these high-paid speeches at Wall Street firms. Certainly Hillary Clinton did it and was criticized for it. I think that the bottom line is I just don't hear anything coming out of the White House in this administration that is talking about helping actual real people, the people that actually voted for Donald Trump. When you're talking about cutting corporate taxes, that doesn't seem to me to help somebody who's actually working a real job.
Well, individual tax cuts are promised to be on the way. We'll see if there's any detail on that tomorrow.
Corporations
corporations
employ these people, and if corporations are having trouble, you know, making ends meet, it helps to have a corporate tax cut.
But hold on, the issue for everyday Americans is wage. The disparity between what CEOs and their workers are getting paid has never been greater. Yesterday, Bloomberg reported that Ginny Romney from IBM was most likely paid $33 million this year, and she's had down quarters for 20 straight quarters. So will there be regulation?
There are a lot of small businesses paying the corporate tax cut that aren't, you know, these big corporations with high CEO pay. Sure, you're right, that's an issue. And if Trump is going to run on economic nationalism, he's going to need to pair the corporate tax cut with things that address those problems. Absolutely, but that doesn't mean that a corporate tax cut won't make a difference. It will.
Well, and he's also trying to come up with an elegant and sort of classic conservative-minded solution, which is to look to the business community for private sector input. It's interesting you mentioned Rometty because she is incredibly active with these new collar workforce initiatives, allowing people to have sort of 2 years of higher education as opposed to 4 and gain job skills. IBM's been active with this for years, and they're trying to get the Trump White House to be more involved, which they seem to be. So it doesn't address the income gap per se, but it does help train new elements of the workforce, hopefully at higher wages.